You'll start at 2. After.
No, because he's done his own got down. But if you look at when he died, it was done. They're 20 years different. We can go.
Okay, folks, sorry, I'll go ahead and start. I'm sorry it took us a little bit later, but we got technical difficulties. Everybody thank Miss Chris. I had a projector ready that she sent us. So we're going to put everything together. We have the camera. Give Miss Chris a hand. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate it a bunch. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, now I'd like to introduce Miss Jen Sherwood. Jen, I think most of you know Jen. If you don't, Jen, tell us a little bit about what you do as an intro, besides being Leadership DeKalb.
Right.
This is the face of Leadership DeKalb.
Well, so I currently am in HR at Star Manufacturing. Work in safety and training at Star Manufacturing. About 10 years ago, I started a different path from Leadership DeKalb, so I have always done that as a volunteer job. And then when my kids got into high school, we thought, oh, do college. And so I got a job.
We understand.
Yeah, right. But Leadership DeKalb is a year-long program. I actually got an application for anyone who might want to look at those dates. Dawn was in last year's class, and we are always recruiting a diverse group of individuals. Leadership DeKalb's goal is to bring together existing and emerging leaders who either live or work in DeKalb County who are looking for the advancement of DeKalb County. So one of my passions, I was a history major when I was in school.
Yay! Yes, it needs to be a member of our society. Yes.
And then we moved here to Tennessee in '90s. My husband is a physician at Family Medical, and when we moved here, I went back to tech and got my MBA, and have been very active in the tech history department. Even though it was an MBA that I got, I still always seem to gravitate toward the history. To me, the value of history is that it helps explain where we are, and it helps give us confidence. When someone says nothing ever changes, you can come back and you say, look, here's a change. Here's a change. Here's a change. And so for us as historians, we're actually the optimists for the future, because we can hopefully steer people away from really bad things, not to do them again, right? But also to be that voice of loving who we are, how we got to where we are, and still wanting to move forward. Still feeling that appreciation that we are going to see changes. So we have to look at how we've dealt with changes in the past to feel comfortable with those changes that are coming. And that's the angle that I'm taking today. This timeline, thank you. This timeline is used in Leadership DeKalb. Like oarsmen, we have to look backward to be able to row forward. A lot of times people say, well, that's the way it's always been. And I say, no, it's not, right? Or they say, oh, that problem is really old. And old problems are sometimes more comfortable than new solutions, right? And sometimes things happen to us as a community, as an entity, even in our own individual lives. So when Dawn asked me to come, she said, but not your normal length. Smaller presentation. And so what I have decided is I'm going to just hit some high points of times when things really changed. That's where I'm going to spend my focus today, of how change, external, desired, however like sometimes change is on purpose, sometimes change has an impact on us, whether we reach for that change or not. So I've got a few events that are, I thought I could call it something nifty like the top 5 big events, but then I got to like 6 or 7. I'm like, I'll just talk faster and have all 7 in there. So without any doubt, the number one biggest place to start as far as changes and history of DeKalb County is with Adam Dale. And the other thing that I've got to say is that I hope to learn as much from you all in this time that we have together, because after I saw that Rhea was your speaker last month, and I thought, oh, God, Rhea has more history in her little finger than I do in this whole wall. So feel free to interject, help us all learn from each other, because that's the only way that I have learned any of it, is because someone told me the story. And I love that about history, is that everyone has their own stories, their own history. So Adam Dale came, and as you look, I know this is pretty far away, but on the top is DeKalb County, and on the bottom are the points of reference of history that are not DeKalb County, but help us to have that point of reference. So Adam Dale settles in DeKalb County along the Smith Fork Creek in 1797. Point of reference there, Tennessee became a state just a year before. I have recently been reading, become fascinated with Daniel Boone and Long Hunters, and this time period, so I could probably talk a whole hour about how interesting learning, what we might know about DeKalb County from all of that history of time period. But the things that are really interesting that have an impact is that the third Treaty of Tellico opens the Dry Creek settlement. So, of course, right here in this time period is the continuation of the Revolutionary War. And then the War of 1812 actually really finalized British leaving. And in this time period, little did we know, the British were paying the Creeks and the other Native American warriors of this time for scalps. So Native Americans were not the ones who came up with the idea of a scalping. It was because the British were paying them for them. So these folks coming to DeKalb County when this was still a hunting ground for Native Americans took a lot of courage, took a lot of silver lining prosperity around the corner kind of people that were just able to float down the river, see an opening in River Cane and decide, oh, I'm going there. And this looks prosperous. Just a fascinating time to me to think about that. Then, as he came, he decided it was good, and so he went back to Maryland. Probably took him 6 or 8 months to actually make his way back through hostile territory, everything else. Brought his family and other families with him, and that's who settled DeKalb County. During that time also, we've got continuing river traffic and more and more people coming from Nashville, which Fort Nashboro was actually the first settlement that drew people into this area. And from there, more and more people were coming in, Joseph Snow, why do you think I might have him on there? Snow's Hill. He started in a 2-room log cabin and then became so prominent that the most significant geographical landmark in DeKalb County was named after him. Super, super interesting. Then the Revolutionary War ends. We have very close to here, the Trail of Tears does not come into DeKalb County, but it opens DeKalb County up to being able to have more and more people safely move into this area. So in 1837, DeKalb County is established. Prior to the 1830, 1830 was the first census of Tennessee, and the state of Tennessee had I don't know, someone might correct that.
Well, we had 1820 at Tennessee.
We did.
We did, didn't we?
We did, but this was the 1830s considered the first modern census.
Okay. Because I have the 1820 stuff.
And it may also, I've actually seen a map of the 1821, but it did not include all of Tennessee. So maybe 1830 was when they were actually, really, what happened with the 1830 census is they were looking at population numbers, and that's why they created some of the counties that they created. And DeKalb was created out of parts of Smith, Warren, and White County. The first courthouse was built, and right in here somewhere, 1838, I think, is when DeKalb County was established with court records. And, you know what I mean, like the actual minutes, yeah.
Jen, I can add to that,
Yeah.
at the time, Cannon County was established in 1836.
Right.
And so my thesis is called Divided, the Political History of DeKalb County.
Yeah.
And some residents of Liberty and Alexandria felt left out of Cannon because they weren't well represented. So they wrote their state legislator, and I have that letter, a copy of that letter.
Yeah.
That Mr. McWhirter from Liberty wrote, and he was just one of several. He wrote letters to the representative asking them to do something that they felt left out because in Smith County they thought they had more of a voice. And the good people of Danville, which was Woodbury at the time, said, oh yeah, we're giving you a voice, and they didn't like it. So they said, we're going to do something about it. And so, and that's where my thesis is a little on political socialization and political efficacy, meaning what I say matters.
Yeah.
So they wrote their state senator and their state rep. And so the next year, DeKalb County was created equally divided between Democrats and Whigs.
That gerrymandering thing happened. So another thing that I find really interesting about this time period is the temperance movement, because also at this time, DeKalb County was the #2 producer of whiskey. So go figure, Temperance Hall, which of course temperance was the movement anti-alcohol, right? Temperance Hall said, oh yeah? You're going to make the whiskey?
Sure.
We're coming. We're coming to your backyard. And so Temperance Hall was actually a utopian community where people were establishing a town where there was no alcohol. So really kind of interesting that in this time period, whiskey was one of the best money makers. Why people were growing corn, yes, to fatten their hogs. So here's the first industries of DeKalb County. Saltpeter, what is saltpeter used for? Gunpowder. And it was found in the caves. Hogs, whiskey, mussels, and logging.
No tobacco?
Not at this time, not in 1850. I'm sure that people grew tobacco, but it was not the biggest. It was not the biggest money makers as far as looking at the first industry. DeKalb County Fair started. And why did county fairs start? Maybe did Rhea go over this?
Agriculture.
Yeah, it was because before we had magazines where you could flip through and see the new fancy tractor, this was the only way that people could share information with the farmers. That was the advent of the fair, was to be able to help farmers to become more modern in how they did their farming. So here's another huge time of change for DeKalb County was during the Civil War. So during the Civil War, and of course history buffs, this is really fun to have, because most of the time people look at me like blank stare. But as history goes, in January of 1861, Tennessee voted against secession. And why was that? Because they had just finished that beautiful Capitol building on the hill, and they didn't want anybody to shoot a cannon at it. And so they immediately succeeded. They immediately surrendered, and immediately said, please wipe your feet on your way in, right? So we originally, Tennessee, from the very beginning, was a flip-flopper of whoever pounded on the door the heaviest, Tennessee went that way. So there's lots of really fun stories about Tennessee history during this time period, especially if you go to the Capitol building. There's evidence of some really interesting, fun stories there too. The closest battle that we had here was the Battle of Snows Hill, which actually was in Rutherford County, not DeKalb County. But is that right?
Yeah, it was a running battle, basically.
Yeah.
Bobby can tell you a whole lot more about it than I can. It was a running battle up Snows Hill. That's why I call it the Battle of Snows Hill.
But
one thing too on secession, Jen, that you might want to add to the chart
yeah,
is the actual vote.
yes,
The first vote was overwhelming. I mean, overwhelmingly stay in the Union
yeah,
in February. After Fort Sumter and after Lincoln's call for troops, of course, in June,
yeah,
it was still close in DeKalb, like 600, 400. It was still, DeKalb was still divided.
yeah.
And it was, one of the largest in Middle Tennessee percentage-wise of counties, all the counties around us.
Yeah. And there were a couple of interesting reasons for that. We know that there was a guerrilla warfare. We know that there are stories of brothers who, one joined the Confederate, one joined the Union. And we also know that the Methodist Church was the most prominent religion at this time. And the Union, the Northern Baptists, or the Northern bishops of the Methodist Church, proclaimed that Methodist ministers could not own slaves. So this was a pretty big to-do in DeKalb County, because most ministers were also gentlemen farmers. Most of them had 3 or 5 slaves that were their mechanics and skilled laborers within that farm, that allowed them to then also be a pastor to a church. Most Methodist preachers had some wealth going into choosing that profession. And so when the Methodist Church, the Greater Methodist Church, said no more slaves, that's one of the reasons why it tore families apart, because they had to choose. Are we going to continue our lifestyle, or are we going to follow the church? And so there are actually quite a lot of stories as well of Confederate soldiers who were taken as POWs, and then they were released from from the POW camp if they were willing to enlist as a Union soldier. So, right. So when we say brothers were opposite, Confederate and Union, sometimes it was that one got caught. And, you know, I mean, he was just trying to get some bread for supper. You know what I mean? Like, I don't fault anyone for that. But this time period was interesting also because of the difficulty in travel that there was. And then the Civil War actually brought a lot of progress as far as roads and travel stations, places where people could stay. A lot was built in this time period for the movement of the war efforts. And so then in 1865, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. This is also the time period where slavery was abolished with the 13th Amendment and the end of the Civil War. And of course, during Reconstruction, Tennessee leads the way among southern states for civil rights and restoring order, which, you know, if they were waffling on who they were for anyway, right? I mean, it's not that hard. Yeah.
Let me add too, that there were 14 companies of Confederate soldiers raised in DeKalb County. There were 12 Union companies raised in DeKalb County.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know.
So Schmidt shows the division again in DeKalb County, how divided we were.
Yeah.
Even in the Civil War. I used to think it was the Civil War divided us. No, it was before then.
Yeah.
And the Democrats.
Yeah.
So, but 14 and 12, and that's more than any other surrounding counties, all the surrounding counties combined on the Union side.
So no wonder we have strong opinions, and you know what I mean. Like, and also most people who have a tradition of having lived in DeKalb County all of their life, or their families grew up here. A lot of times people believe what they want to believe, and they don't really have a whole lot of conflict with somebody who doesn't. They kind of go home. So like if a meeting gets really disruptive, a lot of people will be like, you know, I'm not going to go back to another meeting with that. You know, I mean, that's where modern resistance comes out, is they just quit going. But that's how they coped with each other. That's how family members, you know, were able to maintain relationships. So here are a couple of other fun things that are happening during this time period. Blossoming nursery industry. And as the story goes, in 1880, a carpetbagger, a guy who was a traveling salesman, happened to see a burning bush in Warren County that is one that is extremely difficult to cultivate, and there it was growing wild. And I wish I knew. Someone told me the name of it, but it was the Latin name, and not. But this is how this area became. Because of that word of mouth, that it's a temperate, rainy, subtropical, but rich soil. And so that is the reason why Warren and DeKalb County became an area where nursery stock started to grow, because things that were really hard to grow were just growing in the wild here. And one guy was able to make note of that. So we did have a courthouse that burned, and this second courthouse was built in 1890. Unfortunately, they didn't put fences around the courthouse, and so it really became more of a stockyard than a courthouse. And they really regretted. There are some interesting stories about how much they regretted not you know, just because most people didn't have fences. Most people, things just roamed. And as Smithville grew in population, which it was in this time period, Smithville was not the most populated community up until this point. But as it started to grow, people just let their chickens run. Goats running, oh yeah, and their hogs.
Free range.
And it was free range all the way. So it was an interesting time. And that second courthouse helped to allow for the growth of Smithville in relation to Liberty was actually number one in population. Alexandria was also very populated. And this second courthouse was right at that time when Smithville was starting to really grow. This area that was taken from Warren County was originally called the Flatwoods. And because it's part of the Highland Rim leading into the Cumberland Plateau, it actually is, by definition, more rocky, more scrub-like in how it was growing, as opposed to under the hill that had very fertile soil. And if you were a true farmer, that was the land that was really producing. And so originally Smithville was not as popular as Liberty and Downtown and Alexandria. One other fun thing that talks about coming back to the Union and Confederate, Downtown was actually originally designed for local Union officers to have a retirement community to come to. So it was a pocket within DeKalb County, within Tennessee, where Union officers were able to come back and have some. So some other fun things that happened at the turn of the century. This was prior to the dam, right? But during this time, there were major flooding. So I just talked about how in the Liberty area and the Smith Fork and the Caney Fork, that's where the most prosperous farming was. It also had the best access to being able to hop on the river and go to market, right? And pearls were also a huge industry in DeKalb County. And the pearl market fell to the wayside when plastics were invented, because pearls were that closure for articles of clothing, for your shoes, for your pants, for your shirt, that when plastic was designed or invented, so much cheaper than using quilts for that same clothing industry. So whiskey brewing became illegal in 1909. I don't know how many of you know the antics of Luke Denny, but this was a great time for moonshining. And DeKalb County was just made some of the best moonshine ever. And so it actually was to DeKalb County's advantage to have whiskey become illegal, because got really rich in DeKalb County from either growing corn or brewing the whiskey or running the whiskey.
And they were still everywhere, across and biking everywhere.
Yep. I mean, so we have a farm out on Short Mountain that when we bought it, we were clearing off an area and we're like, is that still? I mean, it was, so the coolest thing, it was actually shoved inside a car that had been driven off the cliff. And we just happened to tell the sheriff at the time, we're like, hey, guess what we found on our property? Next thing you know what they did? They came down and dismantled it and took it away. Not the car. Just making sure that the spill. Last time I tell them the story. All right, so World War I.
Should go get rich, did you?
Yeah, I know. Like I know how to brew. Probably thin my eyebrow. So all of this time, little bits of change in DeKalb County, but really not that much. From the Civil War to World War II, even during the Great Depression, there are lots of stories of people who had and shared, and people who were day laborers actually found work. It's an interesting thing that, you know, how Mark Twain said about Cincinnati. When the world ends, I want to be in Cincinnati. It won't get there for 10 years. So DeKalb County had a lot of things passing it by. I mean, there were Jim Crow laws. There were some things. There were some burgeoning transportation. Joel Evans' father, Edgar Evans, was a great entrepreneur and had a lot of businesses in this time period. But for the most part, DeKalb County was the same over about 50 years, maybe even 60. And then in 1925, this was also a time period where dynamite was starting to be used, and there was a lot of resistance. I don't have time to get into lots of interesting political stuff, but on a global level, there were lots of interesting things happening in that industrialization, where anarchy, the anarchist movement, and lots of kings were getting assassinated all over Europe. And also at this time frame, in 1925, mysteriously, our fenceless courthouse also burned down. And so 25 was when a third, with this awesome fireproof concrete material, was built out of concrete, brick, and steel. Also, in this time period, major flooding of the Caney Fork, major flooding. So all those wealthy farmers were starting to really have a hard go. And in 1929, Sligo Bridge replaces the ferry. So this is the first bridge across the Caney Fork in this time period. Kind of amazing to think how divided DeKalb County probably was, how little commerce there is when you have to go across by ferry and you're affected by weather and the currents of the river. And so to be able to build a bridge is just a really significant thing for DeKalb County. During the Great Depression, probably the biggest impact that we see is that we had 10 high schools in DeKalb County in 1929, and at the end of the Great Depression, 1934, we only had 3 remaining. And so a lot of parents were sending their kids to work instead of sending them to high school. We had no public high school in DeKalb County at that time, which was the norm for Tennessee. In DeKalb County, you had to pay to go to high school at that time. So 1936, the first city water system in Smithville. Isn't that amazing? It's just amazing to think what we think is substandard living. We have people in DeKalb County who can remember that time when plumbing came to Smithville. Didn't come to all of DeKalb County, came to Smithville. And so that's also a big time, given the floods, given the fact that agriculture was just not as reliable of being able to feed your family. And then all of these modern amenities are coming into just Smithville. People started moving to Smithville. It was a huge time of growth in the 1930s for Smithville. And then the war begins, the Great War. World War II began in 1940 or 39, but when we joined is 41, and this is a super amazing impact of DeKalb County event. That over 1 million soldiers were trained in DeKalb County. Most of them were housed in Crossville, but DeKalb County's terrain was very similar to the terrain of Europe, where the war front was. The Rhine River, and so there truly were many sacks of flour dropped in DeKalb County. You've seen pictures of children wearing flour stamped clothing. It is true, because those sacks of flour were the similar weight of the bombs that they were dropping in Germany. And so, and I'm oversimplifying, Europe. But that was one of the reasons why this area was a draw for the Army, is because they could really train them in what they were going to see in Europe. Some fun facts about the soldiers that came is that, again, Tri-County, you're selling it and then you sneak it out, right? But this whole area was very much driven by the Prohibition time period. There were no bars, there were no places in Smithville or DeKalb County. But the soldiers, if they were in uniform, could get a beer, could hop the train and get a beer in Cookeville or Watertown or Lebanon. And so there was a black market for soldiers' uniforms, so that the locals could just borrow a uniform and then hop the train and go here in Lebanon. And also the other very interesting thing during this time period, which had a huge impact on DeKalb County, is all of these boys from Alabama and Ohio and Virginia saw the prettiest girls they ever did see. And many of them came home from the war to a new place of DeKalb County. And there are many stories, couple hundred stories, of soldiers who trained in DeKalb County who met a girl and came back to DeKalb County when the war was over. And many of them stayed. And so in this time period, what is one of the biggest things that can change? Yes, we talked about a bridge instead of a ferry, but ideas can change a community in such a huge way. And so all of these young men who were from someplace else, who had seen how to live some other way than this closed off little sweet Smithville and DeKalb County, came back because they saw the prettiest girl, but they came with their ideas. They came with what they knew was modern where they were, how to eat, how to dress, expectations of how to build a house, that dirt floors were no longer acceptable. All of these things came to DeKalb County through these ideas that somebody from someplace else brought into DeKalb. It's challenging, right? Y'all aren't from here, are you? Right? I mean, it's challenging. But it is also where progress comes from. It is the opportunity for, it is the opportunity to take the best of someplace else.
And also too, Gene, that what they did, sailors and airmen and Marines from DeKalb County who were drafted, went and saw other places on how they did things, and they came back saying, how can we make it better?
Yeah, we've got to bring us up to speed. The other really interesting thing that happened right about this time period was that many of the dollars that went into the war then also came back to projects throughout the Southeast, especially. People told stories of how poor people were in Appalachia, and many federal dollars came in at that time. The CCC, the building of Greenbrook Park, some of those, great FDR projects had finally started to come into DeKalb County. Another kind of interesting, fun thing at this time period, I want to read some of the statistics. In 1950, there were 3,000 households in DeKalb County. 14% had indoor toilets. 14% had indoor toilets. 15% had no toilets at all. So no toilet, not even a latrine. 15% lived in that kind of environment. However, 50% had refrigerators, so you can see where the priorities were. More people had refrigerators than indoor toilets. And less than 10% were without a radio. So during the war, that's how they got their news, where their boys were. And so nearly everyone had a radio. That also changes the mentality. Music was a huge part of family. And I've heard so many wonderful stories of people who the only entertainment they had was going to Papa's house and playing music for hours and hours and hours. In fact, oftentimes they would bring tents and come on a Friday and stay all day Saturday and not come back home, not travel back home until Sunday. So another interesting thing that happened during World War I on this side, on the impact of DeKalb County, is that there was an entrance exam for all soldiers in World War II. And Tennessee was losing many of their young men because they couldn't read and write. And so they just got put on the front line. Because however they tested however they scored on those entrance exams, defined what value they had, what skills they had. And this is why Tennessee started putting more money into local school systems, so that high schools became public, so that children were required to go to school. And if you require children to go to school, that means your schools you're gonna need more teachers, you're gonna need more schools. And so it was the push that drove public education into rural parts of Tennessee, that they were getting dollars in order to do it, and not forcing people to just pay for a few families to pay for their children to go into high school. In 1946, one of our great men of DeKalb County, Joe L. Evans, was elected into Congress. And was it 15 terms. 15 terms. He was just an amazing influence. And there are many really interesting stories from non-Tennesseans about his impact on Congress. He was a great statesman, and he brought a lot of things. He helped support change and progress in DeKalb County in many ways, even though the dollars didn't come so much until Model City in the late 60s. But electricity, Joel Evans was one of the founders of a co-op system for our utilities. And so that idea of a for-profit, Smithville Electric was for-profit when it first came out, because there were enough people on the streets to pay for it, right? But if you only have this house, and then this house, and then this house, no electric company is going to run that wire because they'll never recoup it. And so in a cooperative, that became a state, that enabled on a state level to roll out the utilities throughout the county. And some of the other interesting things at this time period, Center Hill Dam and Lake were completed. What was the number one reason to build the dam?
Flooding.
Flooding.
Flood control.
Flood control. Second was to generate electricity. Nowadays, what's the number one reason why we have Center Hill? Recreation.
And rural,
Yeah, for sure. TVA was a tremendous blessing, Tennessee Valley Authority, that ability to have a voice for folks who had very little voice in bringing modern technology into this area. So I'm gonna, it's a great time. All right, this is it. The other fun thing, some fun things that happened in the 60s. So think about it, 40s, huge influx of people, of ideas, of influence. Takes about 20 years. But the 60s saw amazing change for Smithville, for industry, for the education. So in 1963, that was the founding of the Smithville DeKalb County Chamber of Commerce. Also, the high school consolidated. There are people who still live in our community who remember being bused to the colored high school in Liberty. Oh, not Liberty, Lebanon, sorry.
Lebanon.
In Lebanon. So Wilson County was the closest colored high school. And in 1963, there was a great compromise with Liberty High School, Alexandria High School, and Smithville High School to create one large DeKalb County high school. And the state said, we'll provide money, but you have to desegregate. Took a couple of years for DeKalb County, but Jackie Smith is one who you should have as a speaker, who can tell you firsthand what that was like to be growing up here, and then that huge change for DeKalb County. And it had a huge impact on some, but there were some great leaders in the school, the sheriff, some people who, in some communities it went a different way, but in DeKalb County, it was done the right way. Tommy Webb was one of them. He was a high school teacher at that time, and when there was some frustration, some angry parents, Tommy gathered the kids, took them into his room, never even told them what was going on at the front of the school. The students never even knew that there might have been danger because of the leadership in the high school at that time. So even though that was a huge change, and there's lots of stories of few lynchings, a lynching tree that someone chopped down out of frustration with the community. There are signs of that throughout our history, but when it came right down to it, the strong leadership insisted on the right path. And Jackie tells a really amazing story about that. I hope sometime you might have an opportunity. Also during this time, we go from 54 justices of the peace to 7 districts and only 14 commissioners for the county government. Prior to that, justices of the peace could actually hear cases, could actually document, yes, indeed, he stole 2 of your hogs and you owe him this amount of money. Justices of the peace really were justices of peace in a community where it was very hard for people. There are stories way back when Smithville was made the county seat. It would take people 3 days of travel. That's how rugged our terrain was. 3 days of travel to get from Alexandria or Wolf Creek to Smithville. Just so thick and so hard to traverse. And you're going against the river. So depending on the current of the river, you can't even use the river. You have to go by foot. So this is an interesting time, 54 to 14. This is also the time when 1969, when Joel Evans gets DeKalb County the model city money. I don't have time to go into that, but it's actually the model city project is a really fascinating period of Lyndon B. Johnson and some of the hopes of broadening civil rights. And for some reason, Smithville was listed as population 11,151, which it was not. But you had to be a size of 10,000 or more in order to qualify for model city money. So Joel just a little fudging there and used DeKalb County population instead of Smithville. The money actually went throughout DeKalb County, so it's not like all of DeKalb County benefited. They built the 4th courthouse of DeKalb County, which is the standing one that we have now of steel and granite. And after that, for right or wrong, whether you believe that a multi-million-dollar handout from the government is good or bad, it changed the trajectory of DeKalb County forever. At the very surface, at least, DeKalb County looked modern. And many industries started to come in to DeKalb County. It was of huge benefit. Yeah.
Part of the folks that went to co-ed Michigan.
Yeah.
They didn't have work here.
Yeah.
Yeah, what caused that or what?
Yeah, so literally, labor union leaders came into this area and recruited people to go north, to go to Ohio and Michigan, because they were desperate for workers. And that time that happened as early as the 20s, but I think it was really 40s and 50s, when a lot of people went up north. Some of them said that was the worst place I've ever been in my life, came back home.
Right during the war in the 50s, I mean, it was, recruiting was majorly going on by unions in particular,
Yep.
wanting hillbillies, if you will, quote unquote, that's what they call them, probably strict, to come north because they needed labor source.
Well,
And some a cheaper labor
yeah,
source than
and
the
if
Indians.
you've got nothing and you're used to living off nothing and you've never really earned a dollar in your life because every way that you have been raised is just subsistence. You could hire hundreds of people, dollars, pennies on the dollar, compared to what a lot of folks up north were used to being paid. And so they would build entire factories for all the people who weren't from there to work, so that they never mingled with other factory workers to know how, he was getting 10 cents an hour and he was getting $2 an hour. And they would build entire communities in Dayton and Toledo and Detroit, all the way up where I-75 was, and built entire communities in these little houses. Also, super interesting during this time period was secret in the 40s. Oh man, Oak Ridge. And that was a big recruit for a lot of the girls. And yeah. And so during that time period, a lot of people went someplace else, tried it out, either came home or there was, like water that flips, right? It really had a huge impact.
And Jen, that was the rise too of shirt factories or garment factories,
Yes.
if you will,
Yeah.
in the South. I don't know if you're talking about that, but
Yeah, I kind of skipped over that.
every
but
little
I
town
agree.
had a garment factory because
Yeah.
of a cheap source of labor.
Yep.
It was a cheap source of labor. And
That was really, I think I actually have it on here.
probably the 30s.
Yeah, I'm gonna say,
40s and 50s.
I think it was 30, was it 39? First shirt factory. I'm looking for it. Yeah. So, shirt factories went to the wayside about that same time of the 70s when automotive came into DeKalb County. That was about 70s, 80s. Ferroto started in the mid-70s, and that was kind of the start of automotive in our community. Shirt factories went to the wayside probably mid-80s.
Still working at 197 at Balgore and Smithfield.
Well,
Before I went to Star.
and Omega is still here.
Yeah.
So I mean, we still have, yeah, Georgia girl. And we also lost a lot of jobs because of the North American Agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. Mass exodus of automotive jobs to Mexico. For NAFTA. But luckily for Smithville and for DeKalb County, this time period of the 60s and 70s had such cohesiveness of the community. Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club, so many people were just good people. They were either from here and not from here, grew up here, came in because of the industry that brought them in. But there's an amazing number of stories of people who just brought that sense of community in with them.
Shoe factory, shirt factories, main way.
Yes.
4 kids.
Yeah. I mean, that was pretty good income. And the interesting thing about shirt factories was it was mostly women who got those jobs. And so tobacco farming, nursery work, all of those kind of men-centric jobs continued nursery industry continued really up until just maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Huge wealth in DeKalb County. DeKalb County was in the top third per capita for many, 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 many years. Even now, it's not. It's still in the top half. But we learned. So this is my last little. Let's think about this. We learned from Joel Evans and the Model City, and some of the money that came before that, CCC and the different federal programs that built things like roads and Center Hill Dam and electrifying our county. We learned or you look at that, don't put shoes on your kids today. The feds are coming. The poorer you look, the better it was to get in all this grant money. And it's an unfortunate lesson that some people still have in their head, that there's a grant out there, that if we just wrote for the grant, we wouldn't have to pay for it. So, why do we study history? Right? Why do we now in 2025 look back and say, well, you know, just in 2000, what was interesting, Greenbrook Park playground was expanded, and people really started rallying and say, we need some things for the kids. Took about 50 years, more or less. But they finally got Greenbrook Park. It's an awesome park. Do you remember Y2K? And everybody was really, like, everybody was freaking out that our computers were going to quit. Did you know that the Corps of Engineers brought teams of engineers to Center Hill Dam because it had not been modernized? And so if you needed to know how to run your dam, if all the computers shut down and none of the computers worked, Center Hill Dam was the way to do it because it had not been modernized. The good news is it flipped over, midnight happened, came and went, everyone carried on. So that was a good thing. But as you can see on this chart itself, there's lots of colored names and numbers and details, and that's because when we use this for Leadership DeKalb, we talk about the history, but we also talk about it on an individual level. And so it's the challenge that we all hold with us, that it's not just our story, but it's what we do with it. It's not just that we are fascinated by what has happened, but how can we influence where DeKalb County is going so that the next 100 years are even more interesting and progressive than the last 100. And if you think about where DeKalb County has been since 1925, just amazing change, amazing improvements, amazing quality of life improvements. What are we going to do in the next 100 years? That's the challenge. That's the joy in seeing that where we've been and all those stories. And I'm particularly intrigued by the idea of some of the folks who might still be able to tell us of how it was. That they remember what DeKalb County was like before 70 was built. How they came up Snows Hill on a cart pulled by a mule. Happened a lot, all the way in through the 50s, because that's when 70 came through. Lots of really amazing stories are out there. Great opportunity for us to learn them and to see how they can impact the future of the kid.
My dad used to put it in perspective and say, now, Just think of two Greyhound buses up the old Snow Hill Road. Think of two Greyhound buses passing at full speed on this road.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. Can you imagine? That took some talent that Greyhound drivers don't have now. Terribly now.
I drove it the other day, just because.
When I was I don't remember, very young, I used to think, and at least half the people in Downtown either came from Akron or Detroit.
Yeah, yeah.
Because half of them had gone up there to war to work and then came back home.
Yeah. And we're seeing that even more and more retirees who find DeKalb County as their roots. And they're coming back. I mean, show of hands, right? Even in this group, there are probably people who remember coming to DeKalb County to visit family, but they lived someplace else. But now they're in a spot in their lives that they could choose to live wherever they want, and they're choosing to come back to DeKalb County.
So I do family history. 10, I can find a family that has branched out, and several of them have went north, but they are now coming back.
Yeah.
And you can ask anybody in DeKalb County, where are you from? And they'll tell you, and then you say, what is your last name? Well, you automatically know you're not from DeKalb County. Not from
That's right.
Yes.
You'll see a lot of, I call it remigration.
Remigration is the best word.
And you have, your grandparents are now passing away in Michigan, Cleveland, Ohio, that region, and are now saying, hey, because of taxes issues or other issues, we want to go where it's warmer.
Yeah.
Then they're migrating back. There's a reverse migration with that. Same thing with industry too. I mean, you get a lot of industry that is saying it's not that great in Mexico, that we desiring to come back.
Yeah.
After the repeal of NAFTA, then they're saying, hey, we're going to come back, which is great. I mean, for industry.
For sure.
You
And
can see
Tennessee
it
is very business.
cyclical. I mean, it is cyclical, very much so.
Business friendly.
Yep. What? I was gonna see if I can find it. DeKalb County's first shirt factory that I have listed is 1948.
And I was doing something today, I found several ladies from Alexandria that were working one guy was a garment stacker and shirt factory. Yeah.
And when was that? What country?
1940 census.
Uh-huh.
So it may have been one in Watertown.
Yeah.
There was one down there.
Oh, I see. Right. It was. Yeah, could have been.
Probably. Or Lebanon, maybe, closer down that way.
Right. Maybe not
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, right.
The Alexandria, it came in the 50s, is that right?
I think so.
Or somewhere in that
I
neighborhood, I
think
think
so.
that's right.
Yeah.
And downtown later, and then Liberty, there was one in Liberty,
Yeah.
particularly after the old school. My mom worked there in the
Liberty
70s.
came for
In
Alexandria.
Liberty,
Yeah.
on the campus of the former Liberty High School.
Yeah. Well, and I know Gordonsville and Brush Creek both had, that would have been Smith County, but also had big shirt factories closer to the highway.
And some about railroads, there were proposed railroads in DeKalb County.
Oh, yeah.
You know, in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, where it was, hey, you know, looking at the newspapers for other things, for things of political history, I've run across several items in DeKalb County where railroad coming to DeKalb County, or railroad coming to here and there, and in Cannon County, I think there was a railroad spur that supposedly ran from Coffee County into Auburn town, of all places. That's where it was.
So the only little DeKalb County trivia, if you ever play the game, the only railroad that ever was in DeKalb County was built for the construction of Center Hill Dam, so that they could, just in that absolute northern corner, so that they could bring what they needed into be able to build a dam. and then they tore it up, because it was a dead end, like it didn't go anywhere, just came right to the dam, and they tore out the ties.
Spur off the Lancaster, spur off that Lancaster spike, but you can still see a little bit of that there at Lancaster where it comes back, it spurs off.
I can't hear good, but I heard my name.
And her nephew over there. There into the breast.
Yeah.
We still got snow descendants in DeKalb County.
Yep. Well, thank you very much.
All
I
right,
really
questions? All right, questions to Miss Jen? Any other questions? That would be great.
Yes, I have a question. When are you gonna present some of those other little tidbits?
Oh,
Expand on it.
yeah.
We have plenty of room in the future for
Is this
programs.
part two maybe?
Oh,
We still need speakers for after January, so Jen, you'd like to come back, let me know, and
well,
we will.
it'd be my pleasure.
We will pencil, talk about some of the other things in color there that we didn't.
Yep. There are some, lots of very interesting things that happen. The great industrialists and the industries that came and went. Some really interesting stories about that, and also just about the cultural influences, how music and religion and literature. We have some greats in our midst, and those are really interesting part of DeKalb County history as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pure Fountain College and William Lawrence Academy and Alexander Pure Fountain.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
But they were teaching everything.
Yep.
Art, trigonometry, everything. I just read.
Another really interesting part, might need a field trip, is the Dry Creek community. And how in the 70s there was lots of advertisement of, throw away your TV, and there were, that alternate lifestyle.
You want to say commune, but I mean, that's.
Huge.
Yeah.
It was actually
Commune.
huge in DeKalb County, Cannon County. Short Mountain.
It's a section where
I mean, it happened in DeKalb County. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, nobody wanted to say it. I thought that's other.
I don't think they called them.
Really.
Yeah. No, I mean, they were. I mean,
Oh,
by definition.
they were
But
coming back.
they pulled themselves naturalists. Is what they call it.
Section.
Yeah.
I'll work with from the library.
Yeah.
How'd you get there?
Matter of fact, she did.
Yeah. No, I mean, that impressed, and it's part of just because it was completely separate from how most people live, doesn't mean that it's not part of DeKalb County history. I think it's just it is a fascinating movement.
I have a question for you, Jen,
Yeah?
and that is about your timeline. Can we, or could you, make another timeline for us to have here at the complex that we could display as part of the complex? Would you consider making a copy of that one?
Yeah.
And us utilizing that in somewhere here in the complex?
Yeah. The room that was the history room,
Oh,
but
yeah,
now
yeah.
all of a sudden it's not.
Will be the hallway.
Now it's not the,
It's the hallway up next to the theater.
yeah, next to see, yeah. But seriously,
Yeah. That
could you reproduce that for us
Yeah.
for the Historical Society?
How do you
No
get-
hurry,
how do you
no
get
hurry,
the
but I'm
right-
saying, could you, and what, you
Yeah.
just laminate that whole thing, you put it together, post it?
Well, this
paper.
is actually the third one that I've done. That's sound like a leadership,
Stand
yeah.
up.
But yeah, so, yeah, we have to. And we could figure out, I have
Well, and
I have my timeline that's just,
Right.
and
No.
so we could,
Yeah.
as an aggregate, come up with other things that maybe
Yeah.
need to be on here, and we make sure that we make space for other things as well. That'd be
And
awesome.
we can reproduce this electronically, correct?
Yeah,
Your timeline?
oh, sure,
Okay, as long as we got permission from the author, we're good.
yeah.
I just want to say thank you, but I'm going to end the video since we're talking about all sorts of other good things. So,
Thank you.
yes.